Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a lot to go over. We had an exciting weekend of sports, including the Stanley Cup Finals being set. We're going to go over both Game 6s that saw the Oilers advance to the Stanley Cup Finals after beating the Stars, and the Panthers advance after beating the New York Rangers. So we will break down both of those Game 6s, and we will break down the Stanley Cup matchup. The first game of the Stanley Cup starts in just a few days. We are also going to talk about the historic, record-breaking contract signed by Justin Jefferson and the Minnesota Vikings. We'll talk about the implications of that around the league. I know we've been talking a lot about the wide receiver market, and this is something that really does affect the outlook of a lot of different wide receivers. So we'll talk about that actually in our first segment, and then we're going to close out our show talking a little bit about Caitlin Clark. There was a cheap shot foul. We'll talk about really the league's how the WNBA has embraced Caitlin Clark and what might have to be done about that. So stick around for all of that. But before we get into Justin Jefferson, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all you would like me to talk about, go ahead and drop that in the comments. I will get to that as soon as I possibly can. But I do appreciate all of you guys for sticking around and talking some sports with me on a beautiful Monday afternoon. But like I was saying, we've got a lot to cover, and nothing more important in the world of sports today than Justin Jefferson, the star wide receiver of the Minnesota Vikings, maybe the best receiver in the NFL today. In my opinion, he's the best receiver in the NFL today, and he gets paid like it. He gets a brand new 4-year, $140 million extension. $110 million of that is fully guaranteed, putting his money at $35 million a year. 27 and a half of that he's guaranteed every single year. That makes him the highest paid receiver. That makes him the highest paid non-quarterback ever in the history of the NFL. He is now the highest paid non-quarterback, and he absolutely deserves this. I have yet to see a bad thing being said about this contract, and we were talking about contracts for Amon-Ra St. Brown being put at like $22 million. That was the highest paid. This is now $35 million. He blew the wide receiver market out of the water, and he deserves it. My question is less along the lines of, is this worth it for the Vikings? Because it is. Now the Vikings have him, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, all locked up through at least the 2026 season. So they have a great core of weapons to help develop whatever quarterback situation they decide to go with, whether that be J.J. McCarthy, whether that be Sam Darnold, whether that be somebody else they pick up in the future, in next year's draft, or in free agency or something. They have the weapons to draw in a top-tier quarterback. We talked a lot about how a team like the Dallas Cowboys haven't really committed to Dak Prescott, and maybe these weapons can lure him up to Minnesota. That's a completely different conversation, and we will save that conversation for when we have less to talk about in the offseason. But Just something to throw out there, something that's absolutely a possibility. Justin Jefferson is a guy that can probably draw just about any quarterback to Minnesota on his own, not to mention the rest of those weapons along with him. The Vikings, in theory, have a window, and this is kind of where they've been sitting for a long time, you know, right at that point where, hey, maybe they're contenders. They just need a quarterback, and then they find a quarterback, and Kirk Cousins just doesn't quite push you over the edge, and they just seem to be in this limbo for a team. But it's not like Broncos limbo where they're bad. It's Vikings limbo where they're just constantly good, okay at worst, and it's really interesting how the Minnesota Vikings just seem to continue to win all the time, even though they don't have a quarterback. But that's besides the point. Justin Jefferson, well worth the money, and bringing this back to a little bit of a broader conversation about the wide receiver market. How does this affect guys like CeeDee Lamb? How does this affect guys like Jamar Chase down in Cincinnati? How does this affect these other top receivers, these guys that you can argue are the top receivers in the game, that being CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson? Those three pretty clearly, most likely, you can throw Tyreek Hill in there, but he's not up for he's not up for a contract right now. Those three guys, they're all top three, top five guys in the league, and they are all looking or have just recently gotten extended, right? They're all at that point where they're looking for more money. Are the Cowboys, are the Bengals willing to dish out more than $35 million a year for a guy like, for a top receiver? And I think if they do pay CeeDee Lamb that much, if they do pay Jamar Chase that much, it's not going to be viewed as a bad decision, right? Because those guys, both of them, are game changers. Both of them. You saw the Jamar Chase effect when he came in just a few years ago, his rookie year. He immediately made a Bengals offense go from lethargic to one of the most explosive offenses in the league. And, some of that has to do with improvements along the entire team, but the offensive explosion has a lot to do with him and Joe Burrow being there together. Now, CeeDee Lamb in Dallas, the season he just had, he went off. He had an insane season. Are these teams going to be willing to pony up the cash to pay and exceed this contract? That is the question, because we talked about this a little bit last week, I believe, when we were talking about the potential of the wide receiver market exploding. There's always that shot that the wide receiver market goes berserk, and it kind of is. The cap number is sitting around 250 million. So to make the math easy, the cap's going to change every year, but you're paying Justin Jefferson $35 million, which is just under 20% of the cap, right? 50 million would be 20%. It's not exactly 250, but to make the math simple, we're going to just say it's 250 here, right? He's making a huge percentage of your cap. You don't have a quarterback to pay, but with teams like Dallas and Cincinnati, they both have quarterbacks that they are paying. Joe Burrow is the highest paid quarterback in the league right now, and Dak Prescott, we just talked about him. He's heading into a season where we're unsure if they're even going to bring him in. They're talking up Trey Lance right now. They haven't really committed to anything with Dak Prescott in the future. It's going to be a really interesting discussion and negotiations for these receivers. And where does it put guys like T. Higgins? Because T. Higgins isn't going to beat this contract, but he can absolutely make the argument to beat a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown. They're not going to give him $35 million, but can you see him get 30? Where does this put the rest of the top receivers? Because I'm not sure if a team immediately goes resetting the market when Justin Jefferson has just done this. I could be very wrong, but I feel like this was a huge jump. It's over $10 million more than the next receiver, and it's kind of crazy. I love the move. I love the move for the Vikings. He is the focal point of that offense. You saw it even with Mullins in there at quarterback last season. Nick Mullins, he was putting up absurd stat lines. They weren't really winning games, but he was putting up stat lines of, 30 for 50 for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, and all most of that was Justin Jefferson creating space, getting those crazy catches. Eff it, Justin Jefferson is down there. We're gonna throw it. Just toss it up to him. He'll make that catch. So he absolutely deserves this extension. It's something that the Vikings needed to get done. There were obviously conversations, or rumors of conversations about the Vikings trading Justin Jefferson, which would have been absolutely a mistake. You can't trade a guy like Justin Jefferson, hitting his prime, already doing. He's averaging 1,600 yards a season, which is insane numbers. He's at the top of almost of like yardage per games list all time. He's doing stuff we've never seen before on a football field. So he deserves to get paid this money, and I'm excited to see what the rest of these top receivers get paid. If I had to go ahead right now, day of, quick gut reaction, I don't think CeeDee Lamb gets. I don't think CeeDee Lamb or Jamar Chase gets paid more. They might get paid. They're both going to get over 30, but I don't think they're going to get more. Just quick gut reaction if it gets done this offseason. Now, next offseason, that might change because, again, the cap is going to go up. This deal, it happens with every deal. Massive contracts start to look better and better as time goes on because the cap continues to rise. But if we're going off the assumption that these deals for Chase and CeeDee Lamb get done this offseason, I don't think they beat Justin Jefferson. We'll have to see what happens. There's still a lot of time left in the offseason. It's only June 3rd. So we will keep an eye on all of this as the NFL season continues to tick closer. I believe we're on like 90 days until the first game, so it's going to be here sooner than we think. So I'm very excited. The NFL never sleeps, and that's one of the beauties of it. But anyway, in our next segment, we are going to move into the world of hockey. We're going to break down both Game 6s. So we're going to start off with the Oilers taking down the Stars in a really intriguing game. One that is kind of shocking to me that it played out, quite honestly. And then we're going to talk about the Panthers advancing to the Cup Finals on Friday night, I believe is what it was. Maybe it was Saturday. I don't remember. We'll talk about that game, and then in segment 4, we'll do a Cup final prediction before talking a little bit about the WNBA to close out our show. So stick around for that. We will be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Everybody in the world, please don't give me a sign. I'm losing my mind. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the face shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't even shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't replaced. It's my sound. Shit, don't get it right now. I'm losing it, the music fits, I'm losing shit, and stupid myths. You choose to live, but choose to dip, you choose to fight, or lose your grip, and lose a gift. Oh! Everybody in the Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about Justin Jefferson signing a massive 4-year, $140 million deal with the Vikings. 110 of that is fully guaranteed, making him the highest non-quarterback contract ever signed in the history of the NFL. So congratulations to him. It was well worth it. We are going to move into some hockey talk now, as that kind of was the big story of the weekend, at least in the big 4 major American sports, with basketball taking a back burner, the finals starting on Saturday, there was just two hockey games, two game sixes, and we have a set Stanley Cup Finals. And we will break down the elimination games that got us there, and then we will break down the finals matchup in a later segment. We're going to start here in this segment talking about the Oilers versus Stars game 6 that happened last night, a kind of crazy game. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and throw that in the comments. I will get to that as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you for sticking around and talking some sports with me on a beautiful Monday afternoon. Once again, that link is GSMCPodcast.net. I will get, Kelsey has a question, Oilers or Cats. I'll get to that a little bit later, but I'll explain my reasoning a little later, but I'm going to go with the Panthers, the Cats on this one. I will explain that in a future segment, but for now, we are going to break down the Oilers versus Stars game 6, a game that happened last night. And this game is super confusing to me, honestly. If you didn't watch the game and you go and check out the box score, you don't look at the score at all, you say, hey, the Oilers had 10 shots the entire game. You expect them to lose that game. They win this game 2-1 in a shocking, it really was a shocking game because they did not play a good game. Outside of that first period when they got their 2 goals, they did not play great. Now, the Stars didn't do their part either. They didn't get those great scoring chances you expect them to get in an elimination game with the backs against the walls, like the Stars have been able to do in the past on the road. And a lot of that has to do with giving credit to the Oilers' penalty kill. They've killed, I believe, 26 straight penalties, which is insane. And that is probably the main reason that they are still here, still alive, still kicking in the Stanley Cup Finals. They are still in the Stanley Cup Finals right now is because of their special teams. You want to talk about how you win these games without elite offense. You have to win it in general. To win a series in the playoffs, you have to win in 2 of 3 phases. You have to win in offense, you have to win in defense, or you have to win on special teams. And I'm lumping goalie into defense because goalies are kind of their own special island because you can win a whole series just on goaltending. But we're gonna lump them into defense for the purposes of this. You need to win 2 of the 3, and at all times, the Oilers are winning offense. At all times, they are winning that. Where they really stepped up in this series was their special teams. They had a handful of shorthanded goals. They, like I said, shut down 26 straight power play opportunities against them. They have not allowed a goal. That is insane, the way that they've played. I've praised their defense all series long, and they did a great job. I once again want to talk. I once again just want to point out how insane it is that they won this game because they were not the better team in this game. They were up 3-2 in the series. They were down 2-1. They've won 3 straight games in this series to send it to to send themselves to the Stanley Cup Finals. First time since 2006 that they have made it. And again, like we've been talking about this entire time, it is off of the backs of Connor McDavid, off of the backs of Leon Draisaitl, off of the backs of Zach Hyman. Hyman and McDavid scored goals in this. If you saw that McDavid goal from last night, he splits 2 defenders on a little switch through the middle, gets into the crease and just flips it up. That is pretty hockey, and it is not something that anybody other than McDavid probably could have done, especially against a really strong defensive unit in the Dallas Stars. It's very impressive to see. Now, I do want to say, if the Stars play like this in the Stanley Cup Finals, if the Oilers play like this in the Stanley Cup Finals, like they did in this last game, and I do want to give a shout out to Stuart Skinner, who stopped 34. She stops 33 out of 34 shots. He had a great game. But if they play like this, only getting 10 shots on net, with their, real powerhouse being offense, they cannot go dark for 2 periods and expect to win games. This is a game that they won on grit and grit alone. And like I said, I have no idea how they ended up pulling this game out. They probably shouldn't have, but they did. And that's just how the puck goes. That's just how hockey goes sometimes. And it's a magical sport because of that. But they can't keep playing like this. This is not something that they can continue. When especially going up against a Panthers team, and we will talk about. It definitely is the lowest shots on goal for a conference winner. Kelsey, 10 is kind of what you expect out of the Oilers in a single period, and it's basically what they got in that first period. They had that 2 goals in the first period, but it was not the way that you want to play your game. And hats off to them for being able to pull out a tough victory, a tough game, and stay in it and stay fighting. This Oilers team kind of feels like a team of destiny right now, and there's been that's kind of how it goes in hockey a lot of times. But Connor McDavid, if there's anybody in the league, in the history of the league, that deserves to win a cup, it's him. And there hasn't been a hockey the Stanley Cup. Lord Stanley hasn't been back to Canada since like 2000, I believe, back when. It's been a very long time since Lord Stanley was back in Canada. The Stanley Cup champions were a Canadian team. It's been living out in America for quite some time. So maybe this is the year that they finally get another one. But they have to go up against a tough opponent in the Florida Panthers, a Florida Panthers team that's built very similarly to the Stars, except the Stars just can't seem to get over the hump. The Panthers have been there 2 years in a row, and we'll talk about the Panthers in the next segment. But my big question heading out from this series is, what is it going to take for the Stars to get over that hump? Because the Stars have, for the last 3 seasons, been this almost favorite in the West. They've made it to the conference finals last season, and they lost. Very similar fashion to this series. They lost to the Knights, who ended up winning. 2 years ago, they lost to a stacked Flames team. They just didn't have offense that year. But they have offense now, and they've got a lot of young guys and a lot of old guys. I've talked about their depth. They have one more shot to win a cup before they kind of run into cap hell. And this really felt like the year that they had to do it. I'm a little concerned that a team as deep and as great as this, they're obviously not going to be able to keep it together. They're going to have to make some tough decisions on who to keep and who to cut. And that deadline is coming up soon. They've got one more they got one more crack at this. And it really feels like this year was their best shot. So I don't know what it's going to take for the Stars to get over the hump. I think this was their path to the finals. And maybe they just played too much hockey. They got tired from 2 straight physical series heading into this one. But we will see what happens in the Stanley Cup Finals against the Panthers. And speaking of those Panthers, they took down the New York Rangers. A tough series. They also go on a little run of their own after falling behind in that series 2-1. They win 3 straight as well. We will break down Game 6 in that series, talk about where the Rangers go from here, all coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the Game 6 final that sent the Edmonton Oilers to the Stanley Cup Finals to take on the Florida Panthers that we are going to talk about here in this segment, their Game 6, and what the Rangers have to look for in the future as well. Again, the Stanley Cup Finals is set. That series starts on Saturday, so we will talk all about that a little bit later. We're actually going to do a quick preview of the Stanley Cup Finals coming up in a bit. We also talked about the Justin Jefferson signing, the historic, record-shattering deal by the great wide receiver. Probably the best wide receiver in the league today, signs a contract worth his skills. 4 years, $140 million, 110 of that guaranteed, making him the highest paid non-quarterback in the history of the NFL. But like I was saying, in this segment here, we're going to talk about the Game 6 between the Panthers and the Rangers that saw the Panthers head to their second straight Stanley Cup Finals. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all, go ahead and throw that in the comment section. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you for sticking around and talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to continue our hockey coverage here, talking about the East series. The East is all wrapped up now. We have our champions of the East, the two-time defending Eastern Conference champions, Florida Panthers, are back in the Stanley Cup Final for the second straight year. Last year, they had a miracle run going through the all-time greatest record in the history of the NHL, Boston Bruins, taking them out in 7, running all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals before running into a buzzsaw that was a healthy, cap-maneuvering Vegas Golden Knights team that took home their first cup in franchise history. The Panthers are back for the second straight season, looking for revenge in a very similar team. You talk about a team that's powered first and foremost by goaltending. And Sergei Bobrovsky, Big Bob, Playoff Bob, has been awesome. There's no other way to describe it. He has been the second best goalie in the playoffs, only behind Igor Shesterkin, the goaltender that the Panthers just finished eliminating in this last series. And the Panthers just were the better team. I know I've kind of talked a little bit about the Rangers before, but going into this game, the Panthers had won 2 straight. They win 3 straight. They win this one 2-1. Again, a tight, low-scoring game, just like almost every game in this series was. They were just too much for the Rangers. The Rangers' offense ran out of juice, and they were kind of running on fumes for that entire series, it seemed like. They were able to stay in it because Igor Shesterkin was doing stuff that you shouldn't be able to do as a goaltender, stopping these odd man rushes all the time. And some of that is puck luck, some of that is they miss just wide, but a lot of that is positioning from the goaltender. You get in a good spot, they got to make a tougher angle shot, a more precise shot to get it past you, and they start missing the net. So some of that is missing, some of that is goaltending, and it's insane to see how elite Igor Shesterkin was playing. And it's a shame that it doesn't end in a cup run. It kind of feels like the It kind of feels like the same story of Henrik Henrik Lundqvist. Yeah, Kelsey says in YouTube comments, I feel like the Rangers coasted through the first two series pretty easily, and yeah, you're absolutely right. They won the first 7 games of the playoffs. They swept the Capitals. They went up 3-0 on the Carolina Hurricanes. The Carolina Hurricanes kind of made it close there for a second. They took them to games. They took them to Game 6. They won 2. It looked like they were going to send it to Game 7 or complete a reverse sweep. But Igor Shesterkin, again, has just been the best goaltender in the playoffs. And outside of him, the Capitals were a mismatch. They were never going to win games. As much as it hurts to say that as a Capitals fan, they were never going to beat the Rangers. They limped into that playoffs. Nobody in the East wanted that last wild card spot, and the Caps just happened to be the last team standing. So no one was really going to put up much of a fight for the Rangers in that first round. In the second round, I thought the Hurricanes would put up more of a fight against the Rangers. I really did. But again, Igor Shesterkin saved the day, and he kept them alive. He kept them going. Once the offense died after Game 3, I think that's really what happened. After Game 3 of that series, the Rangers' offense just kind of fizzled out. They kind of ran out of gas, and that's really what their weakness was heading into it. Their offense had a tendency to disappear, but Igor was able to mask that by playing elite hockey. And like I said in the last segment, when you're playing hockey, it's 2 of 3 things, and goaltenders are separate, because if a goaltender is a brick wall, it doesn't matter. The goalie will win you games, and Igor was proving that every single night, night in and night out. And it wasn't every single night that they were the worst team, but it was just about every single night that they felt like the worst team. And then they run into the Panthers, a Panthers team that is hungry. They are, like I said, this is their second straight Stanley Cup Finals run. So it's not an easy thing to do, and they've been able to do it. Sergei Bobrovsky has been incredible. He is propelling them. But what the Florida Panthers have that the Rangers didn't, and those two teams are very similar, is the Panthers have consistent offense. Matthew Tkachuk hasn't really been there this playoff run, but, they have plenty of other offensive weapons. You talk about Alexander Barkov, who has been huge for them at center. Tarasenko, Tkachuk, Verhaeghe. These guys that have just been able to provide consistent offense for their teams. That's really the difference. Their offense hasn't fizzled out, and now they are, going into a series against a Oilers team that will outclass them at offense. There is not a single team in the NHL that can come close. Maybe the Maple Leafs can with Austin Matthews. But we know what happens with the Maple Leafs every single playoffs. It happened again this year. They lose in the first round. And Austin Matthews is another guy that deserves a cup. But that's besides the point. The Panthers have had an incredible run, and the way that they play physically is something that they have been able to consistently throw teams off. In that first round against Tampa, the Lightning came out. They were a little phased. In that second round against Boston, they were so physical that Boston got rattled. The same thing in this round. It came out early. Florida rattles them. Now, the Rangers are a team that are physical enough to deal with that, but there's a difference between being physical and disciplined, and the Rangers don't know the difference. That's really was another one of those things that really spelled their downfall here. They just couldn't stay disciplined in this game, in this series as a whole. So Panthers move on. They are facing off against the Edmonton Oilers. And in the next segment here, we are going to do some Stanley Cup Finals predictions. We're going to do a little bit of breakdown on both of these teams, how they got here, how they match up, what their pros and cons are, and much more. That is coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC. to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the Panthers moving on to the Stanley Cup Finals to take on the Edmonton Oilers. We actually talked about their game and their series before that. And before that, we talked about the Justin Jefferson historic contract, $140 million over 4 years, 110 of that guaranteed. In this segment here, we're going to finish up our hockey coverage. We're going to talk a little bit about our predictions for the Stanley Cup Finals. Who will be taking home Lord Stanley for 2024? Will it be the Edmonton Oilers bringing it back home to Canada? First time they've made it since 2006. Or the Florida Panthers returning for the second year in a row. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and throw that in the comments. I will get to that as soon as I can. For instance, Kelsey asks, who do I think will be the MVP for the finals? And I will get to that later in this segment as well. But if you have a burning question, go ahead and throw it in there. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. Once again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, we are going to talk about the Stanley Cup Finals predictions. We're finally here. It's been a long time coming. We have made it. We know we know the path these teams have gone through. It's been a great hockey playoffs. There's been a lot of great series, and I think we have whittled down to probably the two best teams. We talk about the Edmonton Oilers a lot, and I'm going to keep this little team overview brief because we talk about this a lot. Their elite offense with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And then on the other side, you have kind of the opposite. They have a good offense. They're powered by goaltending with Sergei Bobrovsky, the Florida Panthers. And it kind of is a clash of ideals, right? The Oilers coming in with that high-powered, a high-energy team, a team that's going to outscore you to win, and the Panthers are going to out-physical you and just beat you down until they can, until they beat you into submission. Like Kelsey says, it's been a whole year since the last Stanley Cup Finals, so we we've got it's been a long time coming, but. This is a really interesting series. We talked about the Panthers, how they've gone through. They've just been more physical. They've relied a lot on Sergei Bobrovsky. And to answer your question, Kelsey, I'm gonna do an MVP for both teams. If the Florida Panthers win, it's probably going to go to Sergei Bobrovsky. Again, he's powered their run, and this is going to be very basic, boring answers. Sergei Bobrovsky has powered their run. He has been probably the second best goaltender behind Igor Shesterkin, who's just been playing out of this world. But it's been an incredible run. He's powered them twice now, 2 years in a row, to the Stanley Cup Finals, and it's just been a joy to watch him play hockey. He will win that MVP, I believe. And on the Oilers side, it can't be anybody other than Connor McDavid. It just can't be. You can try and make an argument for Leon Draisaitl. You can try and make an argument for Zach Hyman, but it's clearly Connor McDavid. It is it's kind of a similar situation to when the Capitals won their cup. Alex Ovechkin won MVP. He probably shouldn't have. Me personally, I probably would have given it to Evgeny Kuznetsov or Braden Holtby. But they gave it to Ovi because it's Alexander Ovechkin. And it's not that he didn't play good, but I would have given it to someone else. I thought there were people that were more important to that run. It's going to be a similar situation in if the Oilers are to raise the Stanley Cup this after this series. Again, he's probably been the best player anyway, but I don't see how if the Oilers win, anybody but Connor McDavid wins the MVP for the playoffs. So, excuse me. We'll have to see how that goes. Breaking down this series just a little bit. Again, it's going to be tough, and I think that the Panthers are going to come out and they're going to be super physical. Both of these teams have time to rest up, heal up their injuries, because hockey players are never 100%. There's not a single player out there who is 100%, and they're all hurting a little bit. They're going to go out there, they're going to be rested, and the Panthers are going to come out and they are going to destroy. In the game one, they're going to come out and they're going to destroy the Oilers on the boards. It's not going to be pretty. The Oilers are not, at least in the first period, maybe in the second period, are not going to know what hit them. It's been like that in every single series that the Panthers have come up at, and I know these other teams are aware that they're a very physical team, but it's hard to prepare for physicality until it hits you. You know, you can always look at it and be like, all right, I'm going to be ready. But you're never ready for a punch in the face until you get punched in the face, right? It's something that's almost nearly impossible to actually prepare for. So they're going to do their best, but they're going to be a little bit shaken at the beginning of this game. If there's any team that can get past it, it's the Oilers because of their offensive firepower. But I do expect, at least in game one of this series, the Florida Panthers are going to win. And win probably pretty handily. We talked about a weakness of the Oilers being their defense and goaltending, and Stuart Skinner did a great job in that last series. He really did, especially in that last game, stopping 33 shots against a really solid Stars offense. And constant pressure as well. The Oilers should not have won that game, but they did thanks to him and the defense. I was talking to a friend of mine who plays hockey, and he described it as they played great in the first period, and then they turtled up in front of the net. And I think that's a perfect way to describe the game. But the Oilers have the ability to come in, and I think this is going to be a fun series. I don't think this is going to be a series where any one team dominates, but it is going to be really tough for the Oilers. And the Oilers, they're not a team that can't play physical. They're just a team that likes to be more finesse-oriented, more focused on getting the job done without destroying the other team. And there's different ways to play hockey, right? Obviously, it works for them. They made it to the conference finals a couple years ago, and now here they are in the Stanley Cup finals. They deserve to win. They really do. Like I said, McDavid is the one player in all of hockey that I think if you were to ask any team, any hockey fan, hey, who's one player that isn't on your team that deserves to win a cup? Who's the most deserving? It's Connor McDavid, because he has been the next coming of hockey players for however long he's been in the league. What, almost 10 years at this point? He deserves to win a cup for his legacy, for everything he's done for the sport. He deserves to win a cup. I just don't know if this is the time. And as much as I want to say the Oilers are going to get it done, the Panthers, with their physicality, I don't know how the Oilers are going to respond to that. And I don't know if they're going to be able to respond quick enough to it. They, like I said, they play with finesse, and the way that and what destroys finesse other than, physicality. And it's kind of two opposite teams. I do believe that this series will go 7. I'm taking the Florida Panthers in 7 because I think Bobrovsky's going to steal a game or two, and I think that's going to be the difference. I think the physicality in game 1 and Bobrovsky being able to steal a game later on in the series is what's going to put the Panthers over the edge. So I have the Panthers winning this series in 7. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Who do you have winning this series? But I do think this will be really good. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of great storylines. Panthers looking for revenge. Last time they got here, they have to be tired. They've played so much hockey. Then that's something that hasn't really shown yet, but it's something that can. When you play hockey into June twice in a row, it's not easy on you. It really isn't easy on your body. It's super tough, especially because of how physical the game of hockey is and how physical the Panthers play. It's something that they could get worn down, and if they get worn down, if they're not able to play with that energy, the Oilers absolutely can take advantage of that and take this series. So by no means, I know I've talked about it like, oh, this is kind of a nightmare matchup for the Oilers, but it really isn't. Both of these teams have a legitimate shot at this, at winning the cup, and I'm very, very excited to see how this goes. I'm not sure how this will turn out for either team. But yeah, I do have the Panthers in 7. I don't know. It's gonna be really tough. But yeah. In the next segment coming up, we are going to finish off our show talking a little bit about the Caitlin Clark situation in the NBA, the WNBA, excuse me. There's been a lot of animosity towards her, and we'll talk about what's going on, what if anything the WNBA should do, and what you should expect out of the Indiana Fever, in Caitlin Clark and her teammates and everything. So that's coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished everything to do with hockey. We broke down Game 6 and really the entire conference finals on both the West and the Eastern side. And we did predictions for the Oilers versus Panthers. We also talked about in our first segment, Justin Jefferson signing his record-breaking extension with the Minnesota Vikings. In this segment, though, we are going to finish off our show strong, moving out of hockey, moving out of football, going back to basketball, talking about a little WNBA and Caitlin Clark and what is going on really in the entire league surrounding her, because that's kind of been the big story. There's a lot going on there. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and leave that in the comments. I will get to that as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you for sticking around and talking some sports with me on a beautiful Monday afternoon. But like I was saying, sorry, one more time, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, we are going to finish off our show strong, talking about the WNBA and Caitlin Clark. And really the big story that's the most recent big story, I will say, because everything that Caitlin Clark has done in the WNBA has been a big story, from if she's going to where she gets drafted, all her games being put in the national spotlight, the charter flights now being brought in, so much more attention being brought to the WNBA. All of that, I won't say all of that, but a lot of that has to do with Caitlin Clark. And I don't want to take the shine off of all the other great WNBA players that have been doing their thing in the league, but it kind of was the perfect storm. It happened in the NBA with Michael Jordan. It happens for every sport. There's always that one person that comes in and brings in the popularity. And really what this boils down to is jealousy. Just like Kelsey says in the YouTube comments, it's jealousy. That's what it is. There's a lot of other reasons, and I'm sure not everyone is jealous and people are thankful, but they're all professional players, and to be a professional sports player in any league, you have to have some kind of ego, right? And to see all the attention, these women have been working so hard to get here and to bring more attention to the sport of women's basketball, and then all of a sudden this one girl comes in out of nowhere, and all of a sudden it's done. It happens. All the attention is there. They feel like, hey, why isn't that me? And I'm not in the brain of them, but that's kind of the vibes that I'm getting when I'm taking a look at all this WNBA news and all the crazy stuff that these players are doing. Again, if you aren't aware of what happened over the weekend, there was a game the Indiana Fever were playing against the Sky. And on an inbounds play, one of the Sky players just comes behind and basically body checks Caitlin Clark to the ground. And she embellished it a little bit, to be fair. She played into it, got the foul call, but still. It was definitely a cheap shot, and what really got my attention, more than the cheap shot, more than more than really anything, was the reaction of all the players around on the court and around the league, right? And mostly on the court. On one side, you have this Chicago Sky, this team with Angel Reese on it, and they are jumping up, celebrating a cheap shot. They're letting this happen. After the timeout is called, they're giving her hugs, basically saying, "Oh, that was awesome. That was awesome that you did that," right? And on the other side, the Indiana Fever, Aaliyah Boston, who was the number 1 overall pick last year, is inbounding the ball very, very close to where this all happens. She just kind of walks over really closely, doesn't really show any emotion, like, hey, that's my teammate. And it's less to do with, hey, this is Caitlin Clark, you should be giving her special treatment, and more with, this is a team game. You should be able to stand up for your teammates. I just graduated from James Madison University, and I had the privilege of working every single basketball game, both men's and women's, here over the last 2 seasons. So I was able to go and really get acquainted with the program, and if something like that happened at the women's basketball team here at James Madison University, the rest of the teammates, the rest of their teammates would have been there, and they would have stood up for them. It's something that it's not really a Caitlin Clark issue. It's more a, hey, this is just a teammate thing. You should expect it. And it just feels like really everybody in the WNBA is jealous. And it's a valid emotion to feel, quite frankly. If you put yourself in their shoes and you work hard, and then all of a sudden Caitlin Clark comes in and steals all the attention, you can kind of understand where they're coming from. But as teammates, as people, you kind of expect them to stand up for it a little more. And I don't know what kind of punishment the WNBA should bring down on it. And I don't know if suspension is really the right idea. I don't know if that hit really is worth suspending, but it's something that needs to be at least like retaliated against internally, right? At least, and retaliation is kind of the wrong word. You don't want to get into a fight. That's not the right idea. Basketball isn't a sport where you're fighting, but you want to show, you want to come to the defense of your teammate. And this is going to happen, right? It happens with all the best players. They're like, oh, this is the star. I want to come in and I want to make an impression. I want to, and that's some of it too. You want to make a name for yourself, right? But there comes to a point where you just kind of have to play basketball, and it probably should inspire them to be better, but it doesn't. This isn't a change that's going to happen. This isn't a change that's going to happen right away. This isn't a change that's going to come out of nowhere. I've heard people, like Kelsey is saying here in the comments, if there was hockey, they would come and stand up and there'd be a fight, right? But people have saying they need an enforcer on their team, and I feel like, again, that is too much. And you don't need a hockey. You don't need an enforcer to come in and start throwing punches. I'd like to see some kind of, and I'd like to see some kind of camaraderie on the team, something that shows that the Indiana Fever like each other, like Caitlin Clark. You spend so much time together. Like, I can't imagine that Caitlin Clark is that awful of a person that everybody hates her for good reason. I don't know her. Everything I've seen, she seems like a good person, a fun person to be around. But again, I don't know. Maybe there's something that I'm completely missing. But it's one of those things that I as just as teammates in general, you expect some kind of camaraderie to be there and defend your teammate, really, at the end of the day. And that's the biggest issue I have with this. There are going to continue to be more cheap shots. There are. It comes with the territory of being the superstar of the league, the face of the league. It comes with that territory. You're gonna get more. There's gonna be more physicality against you. That's just what happens. Everybody, when you're going up against the great player, you step up your game. You play more intensely, and that happens, right? But cheap shots need to stop. There needs to be something, and they did say there's going to be a flagrant foul, but that doesn't really matter now, I guess. They ended up winning that game by 1, so it doesn't really affect it. But we'll see what happens. Again, this is not going to be the end of the story. It's been like 10 games of this into her career, and this is going to continue to happen. It's just maybe the league will call it in-game this time instead of having it happen after the game. But yeah, I'd like to see the Indiana Fever come together more as a team. And that's really the big thing that stood out to me, that no one came to her defense. It sucks. It really does. But hopefully that'll get better as time goes on. She's only been there for like a couple months, so camaraderie will happen, hopefully, in the future. But anyway, thank you everybody so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Tomorrow we will be back, same time, same place, talking about all the major breaking news around the world of sports. Thank you everybody so much for tuning in, and I will see you then. Bye-bye.
Let's go.